Good day to you this Memorial Day of 2026. Today I am doing a movie review, movie reaction to a movie that came out the weekend after I graduated from high school. And so the reason I'm doing this movie this week is because it goes with the Memorial Day weekend kind of vibe, the themes and everything like that. But the other reason is I'm actually going to I'm going to do kind of a series of videos in the next month or so, and that's going to be looking at movies and things about my life because last week was 25 years since I graduated from high school, and it's kind of one of those things when you hit one of the big reunion milestone numbers. So 25, I would consider the first big milestone for graduating from high school. And so it kind of makes you self reflective and think about who you were in who was I in 2001, who was I when I was in middle school. My right now at home, um, my stepmom and my dad, they've been going through a lot of stuff of mine, and they've been sending boxes home with me, and I was going through one of those boxes the other day, and I was amazed by how much stuff my dad held on to. And it's been kind of interesting to read it and to think about uh, where I've gone through in this life. Well, that's like doesn't really relate to this. It relates a little bit to this movie because I was thinking about the movies that came out around the time of my graduation. Now you'd think it would make sense to review the big movie that was released the weekend of my graduation. Well, I'm actually gonna probably do that. I might do that later, maybe next week or something like that, because that's actually a good movie. But because it is Memorial Day weekend, I felt that Pearl Harbor would be a better choice. So Pearl Harbor, I remember it came out. So I actually started working at the movie theater. So I was going to high school at Ankeny. It's a suburb north of Des Moines. And a few weeks before graduating, I took up a job and I began to work at the movie theater. And actually, I'll take a step back a little bit. So I actually went to see with my friend. We went to see The Mummy Returns. I remember my friend thinking one of the employees at the theater was cute. And anyways, we went to Mummy Returns, and I don't know why I thought maybe I should go get a job because I needed a job. I had previously been working at the at Golden Corral. Golden Corral burned down, and so I was trying to find a new job, and so I ended up going and working at the movie theater, right? And so I ended up applying for this job, and I remember the movie that released my first week that I worked there was the movie A Knight's Tale, which starred Heath Ledger, Alan Tudyk, Paul Bettany, and a bunch of others, and that was a good movie. And it was actually an entertaining movie. I remember had an amazing soundtrack. The second movie to be released, which I'll probably talk about later in a couple of weeks, was Shrek. Shrek was actually the movie that was released the weekend of graduation. And that was actually turned out to be a movie that was not just good, it kind of had a lasting good. People still go back and revisit Shrek. It was a good movie. It was a fun movie. It was entertaining, and yeah, it was notable for a lot of innuendo, adult humor that was done in such a way that kids hopefully did not catch it. But it was a huge hit. And again, talk about good movie soundtracks. Just as A Knight's Tale had a great film soundtrack, so did Shrek. Shrek had a lot of good songs in it and an incredible cast. I mean, Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, Jim Cummings, who, because I'm now a nerd, I'm a nerd, I know who Jim Cummings is. legendary voice actor, John Lithgow. They had all these, pretty good cast. And yeah, that movie ended up being a surprise hit and ended up spawning quite the film franchise. But the thing was, as big as Shrek was, everybody thought the weekend after. So the weekend after I graduated was that was supposed to be the big movie. So I was able to go to one of the first showings. I was able to go to one of the first showings of it because I was graduating from high school. I had the day off from work and I could get to movies for free. So it was actually one of the first movies I went to for free as an employee. And I remember all of the buzz surrounding this movie because 1997, the movie Titanic came out. In 1997, Titanic became the highest grossing film of all time. It was released at the very end of 97, went into 1998, and by the way, a lot of the reason it did so well was because when it was released, if you ever look at the releases that followed Titanic, it had no real competition. That's why it had such legs. Even though it was a 3-hour movie, it succeeded. It did really well. And I mean, it ended up being a $1 billion movie. It's the first $1 billion movie ever. Ever. I mean, worldwide, that is. And made like $600,000 in the United States. That was incredible for 1997. Well, when that happened, everybody was looking for the next Titanic. Every studio wanted to find the next Titanic, the one that would knock it down. And the first runner-up was Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, and it didn't hit. Now, don't get me wrong, it had did well at the box office, made a lot of money, but it definitely did not make the money that Titanic did. And so Disney came up with an idea. They're kind of looking at these. Imagine they were looking at historical events. What's an historical event they could make a movie off of and make the kind of money that Titanic did? Well, there enters the movie we're going to review today, Pearl Harbor. And so let me play the trailer for the movie as we begin.
How long is America going to pretend the world is not at war? From Berlin, Rome, and Tokyo, we have been described as a nation of weaklings and playboys who hire British or Russian or Chinese soldiers to do our fighting for us.
I'm going to the war. You just make sure and come back for the both of us, all right?
We've been trained to think that we're invincible. But our people think Hitler and his Nazi thugs are Europe's problem. Does anyone think that victory is possible without facing danger?
Warning of Japanese aggressive movement.
December 7th,
1941.
a date which will live in infamy.
We are at war.
So there you have it. Pearl Harbor. That movie, the trailer, as you watch that trailer, I will be honest, that was a good trailer. And you watch that trailer, I remember when that trailer was, that trailer was going through theaters and people knew about, like, people thought, oh, this is going to be the next Titanic. That's what people thought Pearl Harbor was going to be. Now, there are reasons why we should have known it wasn't going to be the next Pearl Harbor. One of the key details that was missing with this movie that Titanic had, that Pearl Harbor did not, was release date. Pearl Harbor was released on Memorial Day weekend, which is great for immediate box office, not so good for long-term box office, because it's usually not that long before you ran into competition. I mean, for one, the next week, better movie came out, Moulin Rouge. But I'm looking at, Tomb Raider came out June 15th. Fast and the Furious was June 22nd. Boy, I didn't realize, man, I forgot that Fast and the Furious came out just after high school graduation. But anyways, the Scary Movie came out. Legally Blonde came out in July. So, I mean, they didn't have... Jurassic Park 3 came on July 18th. So they didn't have the lack of competition that Titanic did. That's the first problem. So just from a release schedule standpoint, it wasn't going to be Titanic. But the big thing that Pearl Harbor failed at was the movie itself. And the movie was not a good movie. It's still not a good movie. I thought maybe I watched this movie now in 2026 and I'm going in knowing I'm not going to like it, knowing it's going to be a bad movie, maybe with the low expectations, I will look at this movie differently. And I'm going to tell you, no, it actually looked worse. So, all right. First, let's get across the things that the movie actually does well. First off, the movie does well with the special effects, the sets, the lighting. I think it actually did win an Oscar for sound editing, and I could see that. There are things that it did, and it did really well. I do actually think Faith Hill's song... what's the name of it? I'll remember the song in a little bit. But that song, her song was a good song. Hans Zimmer had a great film score. It did get nominated for Best Original Score at the Golden Globes. Did not get nominated at the Oscars. Which, to be fair, 2001 also produced The Fellowship of the Ring and Harry Potter, The Fellowship of the Ring, which was at the end of the year. So those are two really, really good film scores that came out by the end of the year. So it's not a defeat that it did not get nominated. But, like I said, the sets were good. I think Jon Voight actually did pretty decent as Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I thought Cuba Gooding Jr. did pretty good as Doris Miller. And for the most part, there were things like that. And when they had dialogue that was actually historical, recorded dialogue, it was done well. I admit, I actually think like the still shots, like they had the train station scene or the bar where they meet the nurses. I even think the costuming. I think the wardrobe was actually pretty good. The visual in the movie actually was really good. And I mean, even you look at right on the screen right now, you can see the poster behind. And I will say that's a good poster. Visually, it's a good poster. And it makes you think, hey, this might be a good movie. And they did so good at marketing and convincing us we were going to get a good movie. And it should be a good movie. Because talk history. It is Memorial Day today, as I am recording this. And it is very appropriate. I'm going to get this out of the way. Understand what I'm talking about is the movie, not the event Pearl Harbor. Do not mistake in that. The event, the moment of Pearl Harbor, what happened that day is, as FDR said, a day of infamy. It is to lose, 3,000 people in a single day is an incredible, tragic day. And, on this Memorial Day, you can't help but say, thank you. Thank you to our armed forces. Thank you for our military. Thank you to those who give the ultimate defense of freedom for this nation. I am grateful that here in the United States of America, I could be here and I could preach. I could be a pastor at St. Paul Lutheran Church here in Ida Grove. And I don't fear persecution. I don't fear that, the deputies are going to break in and they're going to arrest us. I see American soldiers. I do not fear that they're going to do something harmful or evil. Now, part of that, big thing we got to remember, we're coming up on 250 years, that's the Declaration of Independence, and by extension, the United States Constitution. But understand that the military, our soldiers, the Navy, the Marines, the Army, the Air Force, Coast Guard, etc., National Guard, they are the ones that lay that defense, and we cannot ever give enough thanks for that sacrifice. For those who have given some and those who have given all, those who are still suffering from the effects of combat, whether it be Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, the few World War II veterans that we still have alive, Korea, same thing. We give thanks every war, and those ones that were stood ready for war, unfortunately, did not have to go to battle. We give thanks for every single one of them. And that is why Pearl Harbor, as a movie, to make that movie, Disney is the one that was in charge of this film being made. And they should have taken extreme care. Because here's the difference between making a movie about Pearl Harbor and Titanic. Both are historical tragedies. Things that happen in real life. True. But they are very different types of tragedy. One is cockiness, arrogance regarding the ship that can never sink in the midst of people living in luxury. Now, not everybody on the ship was in luxury. That got very well told in the film of Titanic. But the thing is, because of that, it's not as big of a deal that in the Titanic film they manufactured a romance, fictional characters and romance to tell the story of Titanic. It's not a big deal. Because I actually sympathize with the idea of creating fictional characters amongst these events. Because it's kind of smart, admittedly. It keeps you from accidentally telling something about someone that didn't happen. And things like that. And so I don't fault Pearl Harbor for doing that. I don't fault Titanic for doing that. And as a guy, I admit probably the worst part of Titanic is the romance stuff. The romantic triangle stuff. But it's still but Titanic does not let itself get completely bogged down by it. And again, it's a movie that's about people having a getaway on, virtually, they didn't call it a cruise at the time, but it's like a cruise ship mentality. And it's that kind of mentality that they're on this boat and they're going off into the new world, setting sail for their dreams. It is very different from people who are actively on alert for combat on a naval military Air Force base. All right? It is a very different scenario. And the way you approach those two movies cannot be the same. And I know you got, you got Jerry Bruckheimer as your producer. He's the guy that gave you Top Gun, which, he produced Top Gun. He didn't direct, he didn't write it, but he produced it. And I know the temptation, like, he gave us Top Gun, and we need to have a Top Gun type stuff in Pearl Harbor. And I kind of get that, getting you to relate to your main characters, but the movie gets so bogged down in this romantic triangle to the point that it becomes a bad caricature of a really major event in U.S. and world history. A thing that, this came out in 2001. So when it came out, it was 60 years, just short of 60 years, since the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor. So that means if you were a soldier on Pearl Harbor, you could have been at possibly even, 78 pushing towards 80 years old. Which means there's many of them who are still alive. You don't have that risk as much with Titanic. You definitely have that risk with Pearl Harbor, so you have to take extreme delicacy in how you approach it, and Disney did not. And I'm amazed by when they have the fictional characters, they have the fictional conversations, the fictional scenes. The conversations are not. The dialogue is horrible. I'm like, I listen to the dialogue in this movie, and there's moments that are supposed to be like this dramatic, where somebody gets. They even have. So Alec Baldwin played James Doolittle, who's a real person, and the Doolittle campaign that's at the end of the movie, that really happened. But there's this little moment where he gives this emotional speech, which obviously didn't happen because he's talking to a soldier that never existed, and he tells him the speech, and it sounds so bad. I'm like, it sounds like something a fifth grader put together. I'm like, who wrote this script? That's where I said, I thought, this movie was already bad. No, it's worse. It's worse than I remembered. Because the dialogue in the movie is so bad. Like I said, the only good dialogue was the parts that were actually taken straight from history. And it was not a good film. It was a bad mark in the history of Disney. The thing that baffles me on how the failure of this movie is, the people who, for one, it actually has a decent cast. Ben Affleck, he actually has shown at times he's a talented actor, but for some reason he kept on landing some bad movies. But then you have, Kate Beckinsale, she had moments. Josh Hartnett, he was just kind of the top teen guy. But Cuba Gooding Jr., he's a good actor. Jon Voight is a good actor. Tom Sizemore, good actor. Alec Baldwin, good actor. So you have some of these good actors and actresses. And I actually I was looking at the who wrote the film. The guy that wrote the film was... The writer of the film was a guy named Randall Wallace. Now, I'm going to bring this up. I got Wikipedia up on another tab. So I'm going to open up Randall Wallace. So here's he is. He was born in 1949, whatever. Went to Duke University. But look at some of his films. So he didn't do a lot of movies, but he did Braveheart. Okay, that's an Oscar. That's a Best Picture winner, I think. I think it won Best Picture. I got to double check that, make sure I wasn't wrong on that. Yeah, so include winning 5 awards: so Best Picture, Best Director. So it was a Best Picture winner. It got nominated for Best Original Screenplay. The next year, then he made Man in the Iron Mask, and I can't remember. Was that a good? I can't remember I think if I remember correctly, it wasn't a great movie. It wasn't terrible. I don't remember it being a terrible movie. But We Were Soldiers, that's a good movie. Secretariat, that did pretty well. Heaven is for Real, okay, that's not so good. Hacksaw Ridge did well. And then he's doing the Resurrection of the Christ, Part 1 and Part 2, yet to be seen whether or not those are good movies. But he's not a terrible screenplay writer. But he did get nominated for Golden Raspberry. For those who don't know, the Razzies are the awards. It's like the anti-Oscars. It's the awards for worst movies of the year. And it got nominated for Golden Raspberry. And, Stinker's Bad Movie Award for worst screenplay for film grossing more than $100 million. So, I mean, he was a decent film screenplay writer. And it just totally botched. I don't know how it went so bad. And I was doing some reading, trying to figure out how did this movie fail. It's one of those things where there's a podcast. It's called How Did This Get Made? And it's a great podcast if anybody's watched it. And I'm kind of curious if there's a How Did This Get Made episode of Pearl Harbor, because I'd love to hear. I wonder if they actually explore how did this bomb the way it did. I mean, where did they fail? I mean, we throw a lot of tomatoes at the director, Michael Bay, and I think there's some reason to that. Because Michael Bay really does not have a good track record when it comes to filmmaking. But it's not just that. It can't be just that. I mean, from what I'm hearing, what I read, there's a lot of conflict between Bay and Disney, and I don't know if that's because Bay was having bad ideas, was Disney with the bad ideas. I don't know who was messing this up and where the flaw was in, but they really flawed in this movie. And usually when I do these reviews and I do reactions, I do them from a pastoral perspective. And I could go into theology, and I will talk about. I do applaud the inclusion of clergy in this film, which just kind of tells you Randall Wallace, who wrote this, is probably a Christian given some of the movies he worked on and some of the things he's done. Wallace was a speaker at the Fellowship Foundation National Prayer Breakfast. So yeah, he's obviously a Christian. But I really do applaud in the movie the inclusion of clergy, of chaplains. And the reason, and so you see in the background, sorry, I gotta probably make this a little bit bigger. Bear with me, this is downside of doing everything raw. But anyways, I didn't want you to see the Superman face. It's like, what does Superman have to do with this? But anyways, this is one of my favorite images, favorite memes. It's circulated throughout the years. It tends to circulate on Memorial Day amongst pastors. And it's this wonderful image of a pastor giving communion on the beach of Normandy on D-Day. And it says, "Thou preparest," quoting from Psalm 23, "Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over." This is truly a powerful, amazing image. And I do applaud that in the movie, that it includes chaplains. And I'm going to take this at this time, is not only do we give, on this Memorial Day, we are definitely indebted to the military. We're also indebted to chaplains. Because soldiers, when they go off to war, are in the midst of unspeakable horrors, and they are asked to kill other human beings. And that is not easy to deal with. That is not easy to deal with what you are doing to other human beings. And nothing more is needed to hear, to receive Jesus himself. Yesterday, one of the challenges that happens within our church year, in our church calendar and the American calendar, they collide, especially in May, a lot. It is very common for Pentecost or Trinity Sunday to end up on the same weekend as Memorial Day. And, there's churches that want to do Memorial Day services or do something Memorial Day themed. And the thing is I don't have a problem with Memorial Day services in general. I don't think it'd be actually entirely possible for a church to do something that's specifically for Memorial Day. Or go out to a cemetery, specifically do services in that relationship. But to let it replace Pentecost or Trinity Sunday, that is problematic, because the thing is you go to a cemetery. I've been to Arlington, and it is a powerful image to see. If you've ever been up to Minnesota, around the Twin Cities area, you could see the that massive cemetery. It's pretty close to the airport. If you happen to ever take the train down into the cities, you can see that cemetery. It's one of the largest cemeteries in the United States, military cemeteries. And the thing is, when you look at one of those graves, what's on that tombstone? Or what is it shaped like? It's a cross. Why? Because in the midst of my enemies, in the midst of war, in the midst of combat, the thing that a person needs to hear, and especially we definitely, as human beings, as Christians, we have a duty to give thanks and honor our soldiers and give thanks for the sacrifice they give. But we also have a duty to give them the comfort of the gospel and make sure that the gospel is at the heart of a service on Memorial Day weekend or 4th of July weekend or Veterans Day. Because without Christ, in a world of war, where war happens, where conflict happens, where we have the events that are going on in Iran right now, in a world like that, without Christ, there's no hope. But in Christ, there's hope. There's salvation. Pentecost, we remember the Holy Spirit who came. It created faith, makes it possible for us to believe. Without the Holy Spirit, there is no salvation. Trinity Sunday is a full confession of who our God is. And see, that's why chaplains are so important. And we do need, as we need more pastors, we need more chaplains. We need people who are dedicated and committed to bringing the gospel, bringing the means of grace to our military, to our veterans. And yeah, we need people dedicated to serving veterans. I give thanks for organizations such as Operation Barnabas, who serves military. Pray for our military. Give thanks for our military. Pray to God and give thanks for the sacrifice our soldiers have given. And if there's one thing I could take theologically from that film, that's what I would take from it. And, but the movie itself it still remains one of the worst movies ever made. Well, not ever made, but it's definitely a bad movie. And it's a morally bad movie. You heard me right. A morally bad movie. There are movies that are immoral that they were made. Not immoral that they're made, but immoral how they're made and the details in the movie. Why it's immoral is Pearl Harbor as a film should be to honor, to remember people who really and truly died in defense of this nation. Unfortunately, this movie is remembered as a horrible movie that dishonored our military, dishonored real people. And I realized I gave a little bit more money. Fortunately, I did not buy it. It was available on Disney Plus, so though I didn't really have to go buy something to watch it. I already paid for my subscription. But like I said, this is legitimately, I'd call it immoral movie by its making. It was a cash grab. I mean, I have nothing against them making money. I mean, again, the military defends our nation. So yeah, we can have a living. We can make a living. We can provide for, you can provide for your kids, provide for your family, etc., etc. Our military dies in defense of that too. And so I don't reject their desire to make an income off of this. But your goal should not be the money. Your goal should be to make a good film about this very real, tragic, dark day. And guess what? When you do that, the money comes. You will make money. When you made it about making money, which from what I've read and what I've learned about what happened in some of the filmmaking here, it sounds like Disney messed up. Disney, the studio, messed up. They were looking for a cash grab instead of telling this good story. So, all right, there's my review, my reaction to this movie on this Memorial Day. And I hope in the midst of it you heard me talking about the real thanks that we have for our military and our soldiers. So, this was the first movie I got to see for free as an employee at a movie theater. And it was not a good movie. And I remember being one of the only like 10 people that went to see it. And that was like opening day. All right. It was not a good experience. And it's a worse experience the older I get. So in the weeks to come, I'm going to do movies. I'm going to do videos looking at other movies. I'm going to kind of walk through movies from before I graduated from high school. What were my favorite films? I am going to review. I'm going to do one that's dedicated to Shrek, because that was the movie that came out the weekend I graduated from high school. And then I'm going to do, look at what are my favorite films since I graduated. And it's kind of a fun thing to do, because when you review, I'm looking at the movies before high school. No, I'm not looking at the movies that I liked that came out before high school. No, I'm looking at the movies that came out before I graduated, but I actually enjoyed those movies. So in other words, the rule is for that list. I actually have a top 25 list. And top 25 movies that came out between the year I was born and the year I graduated from high school. And they have to be movies that I actually enjoyed before I graduated from high school. And I say that because there are movies, like I said, that I enjoyed after I graduated. And it's really interesting to do this kind of a review and retrospective, because I see the change in my taste in film. And it does speak to time periods in my life, and it's a good way to meditate and reflect on the years that have gone past. So, blessings. I hope this was interesting, and I know many of you were not expecting a great review of this movie. It was a good trailer, and the attack sequence of the film is really done well. I do like the little moments, how they handle the Japanese for the most part. I like there's one little moment they have where they see one of the pilots waving off the kids, telling them to get out of here, kind of almost like telling them to get out of here because they don't want kids to get hurt. One of the things you learn about when you start to learn about World War II, and you kind of learn about the Empire of Japan, it is complicated because the Empire of Japan did horrible, horrible things. But the people of Japan didn't exactly love them either. And that's why I love the movie Godzilla -1 is a really good reflection of how people really felt about the Empire of Japan. So, but anyways, there's my recording on this movie. Blessings. Have a blessed, safe Memorial Day. In Jesus' name, amen.